Ah, there you are. I have been waiting for you. Grab a chair and your favorite drink and sit back and enjoy. Let's begin.
Braylon woke already moving, one hand braced against the damp wall, the taste of blood sharp at the back of his throat, the straw mattress pressed in hard knots under his ribs. He rolled onto his side, and the sound that came out of him wasn't a man's. It was a dry, tearing rattle from the back of his throat. The smell of the room was close and sour, old sweat and the faint mineral edge of the ointment Miriam rubbed into his knee every second evening. The gray light filtering through the cracked window told him it was past dawn, late. He pushed himself upright, his back screaming in a language he had learned to interpret through gritted teeth, tight fire in his lower back, the old brake grinding awake where a blight soldier's boot had rearranged things years ago. He forced his legs to the floor and didn't think about the pain. He thought about the paddock. He limped to the window, his bad knee clicking its familiar metronomic complaint. The north pasture was a smear of gray mist. Everything looked ordinary. That was the problem. The memory of the night before hit him in jagged fragments, the sheep standing perfectly, damnably still, the light with no color, the ground folding inward like a mouth. He dressed in yesterday's clothes. They smelled of wet earth, and he pulled them on anyway. He yanked on his boots, the left sole beginning to separate at the toe, and stumbled into the kitchen. Miriam sat with a cup of pine needle tea and the debt ledger open before her. She was hunched over it in that particular way she had when the numbers were worsening. "The sheep?" she asked. She didn't look up, but her hand trembled over the paper, the pen tip resting against the column of figures. Gone. Wolf? Braylon poured himself hot water from the kettle. It came out brown and bitter. He drank it standing. Not teeth, not claws. Miriam's pen scratched across the page, slow and deliberate, marking another loss in red ink. "That's 3 this month. We're bleeding animals, Dad. We can't afford to lose stock." She said it without accusation. That made it worse. "Going to the village," Braylon said. "Talk to Halloway about the taxes." "Good. Maybe he'll listen to reason." Braylon doubted it. He grabbed his canvas cloak from the hook by the door and stepped out into the damp air. The cold hit his face like a wet palm. The walk to the village took him past fields that grew what they were supposed to. The Hendricks farm was golden with barley. The Millerton property had neat rows of potatoes, the soil dark and obedient. Their livestock grazed in pastures that didn't leave geometric scars in the earth. Braylon kept his eyes on the road, his knee clicking a steady rhythm. The village of gray marches sat in a bowl between the hills, smelling of wood smoke and yeast. People moved with purpose, arguing over grain prices. None of them looked at him. Braylon had become a ghost, a man whose presence reminded people of a war they'd rather wear as a story than carry as a debt. He was crossing the square when a figure detached itself from the shadows beside the cooper's shop. "Braylon." One-eyed Jury's voice was rough as river sand. Jury grabbed his arm with fingers like bird bones, dry and insistent, and pulled him into the narrow alley between the shops. The passage smelled of sawdust and vinegar. "It's back," Jury said. His remaining eye was wide, the pupil blown huge. "The ache," Jury whispered. "3 nights now. Won't let go." Braylon's blood turned to ice. "Show me." Jury turned his head. The empty socket where his left eye had been was leaking black. Slow and thick, the fluid tracked down his weathered cheek, leaving a dark trail against the skin. The sight of it sat in Braylon's gut, heavy. "Hasn't stopped since the moon went dark," Jury whispered. "Burns like acid, but cold at the same time, like someone packed the socket with winter fire and told it to be patient." Braylon swallowed hard. Anyone else? Miller's limping. Says his hip feels like broken glass. Serafina came down from the crags yesterday, white as chalk, hands shaking. Jory wiped at the black ichor with a stained rag. Last time, it started slow, like water finding a crack, but this feels hungrier, Braylon. Braylon looked toward the northern woods. He knew the smell of those shadows, cold and faintly sweet, the way rot becomes perfume. He went to Holloway's office because there was nothing else to do yet. He didn't knock long before the mayor's voice summoned him in. Holloway sat behind a desk of polished oak. He was soft and clean, his hands pale and smooth. The room smelled of beeswax and fresh ink. "Braylon," Holloway said, his smile thin, "I assume this is about the tax assessment." "Something took a sheep last night," Braylon said. He leaned on the desk to keep his leg from shaking. "It wasn't a predator. There was a mark in the mud. Geometry. The shadow ache is back, Holloway. I'm not the only one feeling it." Holloway set his pen down. "Blaming ghosts won't fix bad fences, Braylon. I do understand that farming that land presents its challenges, but mysterious forces are a poor excuse for livestock management. I know what I saw." "I'm sure you do." Holloway's tone was the careful patience deployed for children. "But the Stagecoach Commission has made a rather generous offer for your land. The grade through your north pasture is ideal for the new line." Braylon stared at him. "You want to run a stage line through a mass grave." "The historical significance adds value," Holloway said, smiling like it was good news. "Tourists will pay to ride through the site where you turned the tide. Take the money. Go somewhere the soil doesn't work against you." "Not selling." "Then find another way to pay." Holloway rolled a parchment tied with red ribbon across the desk. "The extension would take months to approve, and frankly, your credit isn't worth the ink. The sheriff is a practical man." The door closed behind Braylon with a sound like a coffin lid. He stood on the steps for a moment, breathing through his nose. Then he walked. The sun was dragging the sky into the color of old blood by the time he reached the farm. In the yard, young Howie was practicing with a wooden sword, swinging it in wide, clumsy arcs. "Like this, Mr. Godwin?" Howie called out, breathless. "I've been working on the moves from the songs." "Put it down," Braylon said. Howie's smile faltered. "Sir?" "The sword. Put it down, Howie." "I just wanted to be ready," Howie said, "in case you need—" "It's mud in your mouth," Braylon said, stepping into the boy's space. "It's blood you can't wash off. It's watching someone next to you stop breathing, and your body choosing stillness because terror makes cowards of the muscles first." He held Howie's gaze until the boy's eyes went wide. "Go home. Forget about swords. Stay ordinary." Howie dropped the wood. It struck the dirt with a hollow thud, and then he ran. Braylon stood and listened until the footsteps were gone, and there was only the wind and the distant, steady hum from the hive at the corner of the barn. He went into the barn. It smelled of rust and rotted harness leather. He cleared a pile of scrap metal with his hands, breathing hard, until he found it beneath. The Blight Slayer looked like junk. He hadn't thrown it away, but he hadn't cared for it either. He wiped a thick layer of dirt from the blade to see the pitted, rust-mottled metal beneath. No light in it. The crossguard was bent where he'd used it to lever a fence post. He tried to raise it. The motion came back on its own, a ghost of a reflex. Something tore loose in his shoulder, hot and specific and final. The sword slipped from his hand. The point drove into the dirt floor with a dull thud. Braylon staggered, caught himself against a post, and hung there gasping for air that felt too thick. "Dad?" Miriam stood in the doorway, backlit by the red sky. She looked at the sword leaning in the dirt, then she looked at him like she already knew how it would end. Braylon straightened slowly. "Just checking the tools," he said. "Dad," her voice was very quiet, "it's time to stop hurting yourself." She held the doorway for a moment longer, then she turned and walked back toward the house. Braylon stayed where he was. He looked at the sword where it leaned in the soil like it had been planted. From the corner of the barn, the hum of the bees shifted. It wasn't steady anymore. It was a sharp, vibrating drone that set his teeth on edge. He didn't pick the sword up, but he didn't go inside. He watched the shadows of the forest begin to stretch across his fence line, and he knew they weren't going to stop at the gate.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more adventures.